reception hall smelled like gardenias and someone else's happiness. I'd been standing near the coat check for 11 minutes. I know because I kept checking my phone, waiting for a text that wasn't coming. Around me, couples filtered past in their good clothes, the women in heels they'd regret by 10 o'clock, the men already loosening their ties before the cocktail hour even started. Everyone had someone. I had a clutch purse and a +1 reservation under a name I was starting to hate. His name was Garrett. We'd been together for 2 years. I'd bought this dress specifically because he once said blue looked good on me. Navy, knee-length, the kind that takes 20 minutes to zip up by yourself. I'd done it alone in my apartment bathroom that morning, twisting my arms behind my back, thinking about how I'd tell this story someday. The wedding where Garrett finally introduced me to his work friends, where things felt official, where we started talking about the next step. The text came at 6:47 p.m. Something came up. Don't wait for me. Sorry. That was it. No period. No call. Just those 9 words and a green bubble. I stood there reading it 3 times like the meaning might change. It didn't. The wedding was for my coworker Joanna's sister. I knew maybe 4 people in that room. Garrett was supposed to be my buffer, my hand to hold, my reason to stay past 9. Without him, I was just a woman in a navy dress standing alone near the coat check at a stranger's wedding. I thought about leaving. I genuinely did. I'd already mapped the route to the parking garage in my head when someone appeared beside me. A woman about my mother's age, in a yellow blazer, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "You look like you just got a text you didn't want," she said. She handed me one of the glasses without asking. Her name was Sylvia, and she turned out to be the bride's aunt, stationed near the coat check specifically because she'd done this at enough weddings to know that someone always needed champagne and company in exactly this spot. "My boyfriend just canceled," I told her. I don't know why I said it so plainly. Maybe because she'd handed me champagne before asking a single question. Sylvia clicked her tongue. "First time?" "No," I admitted. She looked at me steadily over the rim of her glass. "Third time's when you stop calling it a pattern and start calling it a decision." I didn't know what to say to that. I laughed, a little unsteadily, and drank the champagne too fast. That was when I noticed the man near the window. He was tall, somewhere around 30, in a charcoal suit that fit like it had been made for someone who'd since lost 10 pounds. He was standing with his hands in his pockets, looking out at the garden lights, and he had the same expression I probably had, that very specific look of someone performing fine at a social event while internally doing something else entirely. Sylvia followed my gaze. "That's my nephew," she said. "His fiancée called off their engagement this morning. He came anyway because he'd already RSVP'd and, I quote, didn't want to waste the chicken." I almost choked on champagne. "He sounds practical," I managed. "He's an idiot," Sylvia said with great affection. "But the good kind." She paused. "You should go talk to him. Misery loves company. So does chicken." I told her I wasn't going to go talk to a stranger at a wedding just because we'd both been let down tonight. Then I went and talked to him. I don't know what I expected. Someone bitter, maybe, or someone doing that thing where they perform being fine so hard it becomes its own kind of exhausting. What I got was a man who turned from the window when I walked up, looked at me for a moment and said, "You're the other one, aren't you?" Sylvia told me there was another one. "She deployed us both," I said. Classic Sylvia. He almost smiled. "I'm Kit. Ren," I said, then caught myself. "Wait, no, I'm not supposed to use names she's used before. I'm actually, call me June." He stared at me. "Sorry," I said. "Long day." "I'm Nell." That one stuck. It was my middle name. I'd never introduced myself with it before. Something about that night made me want to be a slightly different version of myself. "Kit," he said again. Short for Christopher, but no one calls me that except my mother when she's angry. We stood at the window together and watched the first dance start on the other side of the glass. Joanna's sister looked radiant. Her husband couldn't stop grinning. I felt a complicated twist of feelings I didn't examine too closely. "She called it off this morning," Kit said, not looking at me. 8 years. She said she'd been trying to find the right time for 6 months and she was tired of waiting for the right time. I didn't say I'm sorry because it felt hollow. "What did you do after?" "Drove around for an hour. Then came here." A pause. "You stood by the coat check for 11 minutes. He looked at me sideways. Did you count? I had nothing else to do. He did smile then, properly, and it changed his whole face. Not handsome in the obvious way, more like the kind of face that gets more interesting the longer you look at it. We ate dinner at the same table. Sylvia had arranged it, naturally. He had the chicken, I had the salmon. We talked through 3 courses about nothing important. His job doing structural engineering for a firm downtown, my work as a paralegal at a mid-size firm. The fact that we'd apparently both been to the same Trader Joe's on Clement Street every Sunday morning for 2 years without ever crossing paths. We probably have, he said. I always go around 10. I go at 10:15. You're 15 minutes behind me every week. I prefer to think of myself as 15 minutes ahead of next week's you. He laughed. It was a real one, the kind that catches people off guard. I filed it away somewhere without meaning to. By the time they cut the cake, I had told him things I hadn't planned to tell anyone. About Garrett. Not just tonight, but the pattern Sylvia had named. The first time he canceled, 6 months in, when his friend needed a ride to the airport at the exact moment of my firm's holiday party. The second time, my birthday dinner, 40 minutes after the reservation, a voicemail about a work emergency I never quite believed. And this, a wedding I'd RSVP'd for 2. After the first one, I thought it was circumstance, I told him. After the second, I thought I was being dramatic. After tonight, I think Sylvia might be right. About it being a decision? Kit asked. About calling it what it is. He was quiet for a moment. 8 years, and I kept thinking the timing was just never right. For a proposal, for moving in together, for having the hard conversations. Turned out she'd been having those conversations in her head for 6 months, and I was still waiting for the right moment to start. We both kept waiting, I said. We should stop doing that, he said. And then, in the same tone, as if it followed naturally, do you want to get out of here? There's a diner 3 blocks away that does good pie at midnight. The pie was excellent. We stayed until 1:30. I gave him my number in the parking lot. He texted me before I got to my car. The structural integrity of that crust was genuinely impressive. Kit. I broke up with Garrett on a Tuesday. It was easier than I expected, which told me something I should have noticed months ago. He said he'd been thinking the same thing. Neither of us cried. I drove home and made pasta and felt, underneath the ordinary sadness, something that might have been relief. Kit texted 3 days later. Not to ask me out, just to send a photo of the Trader Joe's parking lot with the caption, "Arrived 10,002. You'd be impressed." I was. We saw each other the following Friday, then the Friday after that. It was uncomplicated in a way I hadn't expected, like a door that opened without sticking. He was steady. He said what he meant. When he was going to be 20 minutes late, he called, not texted. Called. I noticed that more than I should have. By November, I'd met his sister, a pediatric nurse named, actually, I'll call her by what Kit called her, just my sister. Because that's how he always referred to her. Never by name in my presence, as though she existed in a separate category he was protective of. She was warm and direct, and told me over brunch that Kit had been different since meeting me. Lighter, she said, and I didn't know how to hold that, so I just smiled and ate my eggs. I did not tell my mother about Kit for 2 months. She has a way of attaching to things before I'm ready to name them, and I wanted this one to be mine for a while. When I finally told her, she asked 3 questions in order. Does he have a job? Does he have a temper? And does he make you laugh? I said yes, no, and yes. She said, then stop overthinking it. I was trying. What I hadn't told Kit, what I was still trying to tell myself, was that Garrett had left something behind besides the empty drawer in my dresser. The 2 years I'd spent rearranging my expectations around someone else's inconsistency had done something to my sense of what was normal. Effort felt suspicious. Reliability felt like it was waiting to fail. When Kit texted when he said he would, some part of me was waiting for the day he wouldn't. It made me hard to be with sometimes. I knew it. I didn't know how to fix it. The moment it came to a head was a Thursday in February. Kit had planned dinner for my birthday, a real reservation. The kind with a confirmation email and a specific time. 7:30. I got there at 7:25. At 7:40, he wasn't there yet. I sat with my water glass and felt the old machinery start up, the familiar calculations, the rehearsed disappointment, the quiet bracing. He walked in at 7:43, slightly out of breath, with a look on his face I hadn't seen before. There was an incident at the site, he said, before he'd even sat down. A beam calculation that needed immediate review. I called you twice. Your phone was on silent, I think, and I texted. I should have been here first. I'm sorry. He sat down. I'm really sorry, Nell. I know what that must have looked like. He knew. He knew exactly what it looked like, because I had told him, over those Friday dinners and late-night calls, what the last 2 years had trained me to expect. I looked at him across the table. My eyes were doing something embarrassing. You called, I said. Twice, and you came. I was never not coming. He reached across and put his hand over mine. I was just late. There's a difference. I know that sounds simple. It is simple. But sometimes simple things are the ones that get you. I cried a little, quietly, into my bread. Kit pretended not to notice, which was exactly right. We moved in together in April. It was his idea. Offered over coffee on a Sunday morning at that Trader Joe's on Clement Street. Finally, after 2 years of 15-minute intervals occupying the same time slot, "You're here every week," he said. "I'm here every week. This is inefficient." Are you proposing cohabitation based on grocery scheduling? I'm proposing cohabitation based on the fact that I want to see you every morning and the commute from your place is 40 minutes. He paused. The grocery thing is also valid. I said yes to both. His apartment was bigger. Mine had better light. We found a place that had both. It took 6 weeks and 4 apartments that were wrong in various ways before we found it. A 2-bedroom in the Richmond with bay windows and a landlord named Osi who told us on the tour that the previous tenants had lasted 9 years, and he was hoping for a similar arrangement. No pressure, Kit said when Osi's back was turned. Enormous pressure, I whispered back. We signed the lease 2 days later. Living with someone reveals things that courtship conceals. I learned that Kit did the dishes immediately after every meal, which was both admirable and faintly compulsive. He learned that I required 30 minutes of quiet in the morning before I was capable of actual conversation, a requirement I had never disclosed to anyone, and which he accommodated without comment, simply placing coffee on the counter and retreating to the other room until I emerged. Functional. Around 8. It was the small adjustments that told me the most, the way he moved things slightly to make space for mine without being asked. The way I started cooking on Sundays because it turned out to be one of the only times I could make him sit down and do nothing for a full hour. Small economies of care. We were building a language. I want to be careful here about what I say next, because it matters. 9 months after we moved in, I found out I was pregnant. We hadn't planned it. We hadn't unplanned it either, which, at 31, with someone I loved and trusted and lived with, felt different from how it might have felt 3 years earlier. I sat with the test in the bathroom for a long time, doing the kind of thinking that is less like thought and more like weather. I told Kit that evening. He was quiet for longer than I expected. Long enough that I felt the old machinery start up again. The bracing, the waiting. Then he said, "Okay, we figure this out together. Whatever you want to do. Not I think we should. Not obviously we're keeping it. Not this is a lot. Just whatever you want to do. Together." I want to underline that sentence because it was the one that mattered. We kept the pregnancy. We told his sister first because she was the one most likely to be genuinely, uncomplicatedly happy, and we needed that before the complicated conversations with our parents. His sister cried. She hugged me for a long time without saying anything. My mother asked if we were getting married. I told her we were talking about it. Kit and I had the conversation that night, sitting on the floor of our apartment because we'd been in the middle of assembling a bookshelf and neither of us had wanted to stop and sit at the table like a formal occasion. It felt right somehow to have it like that, practical and real, amid the instruction manual and the mismatched Allen wrenches. "I want to marry you," he said. "I've wanted to for a while. I just wasn't going to ask you in a way that looked like I was asking because of the baby." "When were you going to ask?" "I had something planned for June." He looked mildly put out. "It was a good plan." "Tell me the plan." He told me. It involved Point Reyes, a picnic, and a very specific timing with the afternoon light that he had apparently researched. It was, genuinely, a good plan. "That's still the plan," I told him. "We're still going to Point Reyes. You already know what I'm going to ask. I want the picnic anyway." He proposed in June at Point Reyes with the afternoon light exactly as researched. I said yes before he finished the question. The ring was simple. He knew me well enough to know that, and it fit perfectly, which he admitted later had required a covert measurement of my other rings while I slept. a fact I found both slightly unsettling and completely characteristic. We got married in September, small, 22 people, his family and mine. Sylvia in yellow again, Joanna from my office who'd unknowingly hosted the first act of this whole story. The ceremony was short and the dinner was long. Kit cried during the vows, which surprised him more than it surprised me. Sylvia found me near the end of the night. "I take full credit," she said. "You handed a stranger champagne and told her to talk to your nephew. That's called matchmaking," she said serenely. "I've been doing it for 40 years. The key is positioning." She nodded toward Kit, who was dancing with his mother. "He was always a good boy. He just needed someone who'd been through the right amount of difficult to appreciate it." I thought about that. The right amount of difficult to appreciate it. I thought about that. The 2 years of rearranging myself around someone else's carelessness. The coat check and the 9-word text in the navy dress. I thought about the woman I was at 6:47 p.m. on the night of Joanna's sister's wedding, standing alone, already composing the story she'd tell herself about why it was fine. And I thought about the woman I was now, in the same kind of blue dress, with a ring on her finger, and a baby arriving in 4 months and a husband who called when he was going to be late. Not a perfect life. Not a neat one. But mine. Genuinely. Specifically mine. Our daughter was born in January. We named her after no one in particular. Just a name we both liked, that felt like it belonged to her before we'd ever met her. She arrived 3 days early, in the middle of a rainstorm, and she came out making a sound like an argument, which Kit said was clearly from my side of the family. She has his eyes. I notice it every morning. Sylvia visited when she was 6 weeks old. She sat in the chair by the window, holding a small sleeping person who had no opinion yet about any of the choices that had led to her existence, and she looked profoundly satisfied. "I knew," she said simply. "You handed me champagne," I said. "I knew," she said again. I don't believe in the version of fate where things are arranged in advance, where the universe positions coat checks and aunts in yellow blazers to reroute your life at exactly the right moment. I think accidents happen. I think bad timing happens. I think 2 years of a relationship that was slowly teaching you to expect less can happen, and you can let it, and then one night you can stand in a reception hall that smells like gardenias and make a different choice. I chose the champagne. I chose the window. I chose to walk up to a stranger who was also having the kind of night that changes you if you let it. Garrett texted me once, 8 months after we broke up, to say he'd heard I was engaged, and that he hoped I was happy. I stared at it for a while. Then I typed back, "I am," and put my phone down and went back to assembling the crib, where Kit was trying to interpret instruction diagrams that appeared to have been designed by someone who had never encountered an actual human being. We got it together eventually. We usually do. I've thought a lot about what would have happened if I'd left that reception hall when I first wanted to. It would have been the reasonable thing to do. My boyfriend had canceled, I barely knew anyone there, and the parking garage was 3 blocks away. I had every practical reason to go home, take off the navy dress, and call it a bad night. Most people would have. I almost did. But I stayed. And I think about why. It wasn't hope exactly. It wasn't some feeling that the night was about to turn. It was closer to stubbornness, a refusal to let Garrett's absence shrink the evening down to nothing. I'd bought the dress. I'd driven there. I was going to eat the salmon. That's not wisdom. That's just being tired of making yourself smaller to accommodate someone else's carelessness. And I think that's the thing I'd want someone to take from this, if they're in the middle of what I was in the middle of then. Not that the universe will reward you for staying at a wedding. Not that a stranger at a window is waiting for you somewhere. But that the moment you stop rearranging your life around someone who keeps not showing up, that moment is the beginning of something. You don't always get to know what. You just get to stop waiting. Garrett wasn't a villain. That's the complicated part. He was someone who communicated in 9-word texts and called it a schedule conflict. And I kept deciding that was a language I could learn to live in. 2 years of that teaches you things you don't realize you've learned. That reliability is probably temporary. That effort is probably performance, that the safe bet is to not need too much. Those lessons don't leave just because the person who taught them does. Kit had to undo them, slowly, without knowing exactly what he was undoing. The night he showed up late to my birthday and called twice and came anyway, that was the night I understood what I'd been measuring everyone against. Not some ideal, just the basic thing, someone who tries. Someone who, when they're going to be late, calls. That sounds like such a low bar. It wasn't a low bar for me then. It was the bar I'd stopped believing anyone would clear. What I know now is that the choices you make when you're at your most tired and most disappointed, those are the ones that count. Not because some invisible ledger is keeping score, but because those choices tell you what you actually believe about what you deserve. I stayed at that wedding because some part of me still believed the night could be worth something. That part was right. Sylvia handed me champagne and pointed me toward a window. Kit turned around. Everything else was just the two of us deciding over and over to keep choosing it. My daughter is asleep in the next room. Kit is doing the dishes, which he will finish in exactly 7 minutes because he always does. I don't take any of it for granted because I remember what it felt like to stand near a coat check and count the minutes on my phone. I just don't do that anymore.